whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
In 1984, a film clawed its way out of the collective subconscious and into cinematic history. A Nightmare on Elm Street taught an entire generation to be afraid of their own dreams. The story of Freddy Krueger, the vengeful spirit of a child murderer who could kill you in your sleep, became a new and terrifying kind of folklore. But the terror you saw on screen is only a pale reflection. The truth is, the nightmare was real long before the camera started rolling. It was born from national tragedy, personal trauma, and a medical mystery so profound it remains unsolved to this day. The film wasn't just a work of fiction, it was a dark mirror, reflecting horrors that were all too real. Tonight, we count down the 10 horrifying truths that prove the curse of Elm Street is more than just a story. Number 10. Our countdown begins with the film's very name, Elm Street. It sounds mundane, familiar, the kind of idyllic suburban setting where nothing bad could ever happen. Director Wes Craven claimed he chose the name partly because almost every town in America has one, giving the horror a universal address. But the director had a much darker, more specific association in mind. He connected his fictional street of horrors to another infamous Elm Street in Dallas, Texas. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on Elm Street. For Wes Craven, and for an entire generation, this event represented a profound and violent loss of innocence. He explicitly stated that he saw this location as the place where the innocent world ended. By naming his film A Nightmare on Elm Street, he wasn't just picking a generic setting. He was deliberately grounding his story in a place synonymous with a real-world nightmare, a place where a nation's sense of safety was shattered in an instant. The film's foundation is built not on fantasy, but on the bedrock of a historical trauma that still haunts the American psyche.
And here comes the President of the United States. And the First Lady sitting in the back seat. President's wife, Jackie Kennedy, was not hurt. She walked into the hospital at her husband's stretcher side.
Number 9. Freddy Krueger's Lair, the dark, steaming, labyrinthine boiler room, is one of the most iconic locations in horror cinema. It's a physical manifestation of industrial hell, a place of fire and shadow where the monster is king. But for the cast and crew filming in that hellish space, they were unknowingly exposed to a danger that was all too real and completely invisible. The scenes were filmed in the derelict basement of the old Lincoln Heights jail in Los Angeles, a location chosen for its authentic, decaying atmosphere. It was the perfect set. So perfect, in fact, that immediately after production wrapped, the entire building was officially condemned. The reason? Asbestos. For weeks, the actors and crew had been working in and breathing the contaminated air of Freddy's home. They were surrounded by a known carcinogen, a silent, microscopic killer lurking in the very dust of the set. The fictional threat of Freddy's glove was matched by the real, insidious threat of a toxic environment, a danger that follows its victims for years. The nightmare wasn't just in the script.
The former jail has long been rumored to be haunted. Building staff and visitors have reported experiencing unexplained or paranormal activity.
Number 8. The origin of Freddy Krueger's terrifying appearance. His grimy clothes, his unsettling hat, his malicious presence wasn't born in a writer's room. It was a memory, buried deep in Wes Craven's childhood. An image so frightening it haunted him for decades before finding its way onto the screen. Craven recalled being a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, when he was awoken by a strange man on the sidewalk outside his home. The man was dressed in shabby clothes and wore a hat that partially obscured his face. He stopped, and in a moment that chilled Craven to the bone, he looked up and stared directly into the boy's eyes, as if he somehow knew he was being watched. Terrified, the young Craven hid from the window. When he crept back for another look, the man was still there, still staring, a look of profound malice on his face. He then turned and walked into the building's entryway, as if to come inside. That terrifying stranger with his hat and what Craven called a sick sense of humor about how delightful it was to try to terrify a child became the physical template for Freddy Krueger. The monster who would haunt the world's dreams was not entirely fiction. He was a real-life boogeyman from the director's own past.
I took all their children away from them.
Number 7. In the film, Freddy Krueger is known as the Springwood Slasher, a child murderer who was hunted down and killed by the town's parents. But in Wes Craven's original script, his crime was something else. Something the studio and filmmakers ultimately deemed too real and too controversial to depict. Originally, Freddy was written as a child molester. This was the core of his evil. However, at the time of the film's production in the early 1980s, a series of highly publicized and horrific child molestation cases were dominating the news in California. The filmmakers grew deeply concerned that the movie would be accused of exploiting these very real, ongoing tragedies for entertainment. They feared the film would be seen as tasteless and opportunistic. So, a chilling calculation was made. To avoid the controversy, they changed Freddy's backstory from child molester to child murderer. It was a decision made not for creative reasons, but as a direct response to the horrors of the real world. A dark compromise that illustrates just how closely the film's fiction was shadowed by reality.
In what may become one of the biggest child molesting cases ever on record, a case which has shocked much of Southern California.
Number 6. On screen, the character of Rod Lane is a teen in turmoil. He's wrongly accused of his girlfriend's brutal murder, trapped in a jail cell, and haunted by a terror he can't explain. His desperation is palpable, but the actor playing him, Jesus Garcia, credited in the film as Nick Corey, was living a nightmare of his own, one he kept hidden from the cast and crew. In a stunning 2014 interview, Garcia revealed a shocking truth. During the filming of A Nightmare on Elm Street, he was battling severe depression, homelessness, and a heroin addiction. He admitted to snorting heroin in the bathroom between takes just to get through the day. He was high on the drug during the filming of the emotional jail cell scene. Actress Heather Langenkamp later recalled that during that take, his eyes were watery and they weren't focused. What audiences saw as a powerful performance was, in part, the reflection of a man's real-life struggle. His raw desperation, his fear, the haunted look in his eyes, it wasn't all acting. It was the authentic pain of an artist living through his own private hell, a reality that bled through the screen and became a permanent, tragic part of the film's legacy.
Rocker, they thought I was the murderer, you know, when you saw the movie. And
did you have to read for that part, or
yes.
did they just pick you up?
Yes, I read for Wes. I was frustrated. And I went in frustrated, which was perfect for the character.
Right.
Number 5. For every horror icon, there are the heroes who stand against them. Veteran actor John Saxon portrayed the skeptical but ultimately protective father, Lieutenant Don Thompson. He was a beloved figure in the genre, a grounding presence who survived the first film and returned to the franchise in Dream Warriors. But even cinematic heroes can't escape reality. On July 25, 2020, John Saxon passed away from complications related to pneumonia at the age of 83. While his death was not mysterious or supernatural, it marks a somber and significant chapter in the film's history. The man who fought a dream demon on screen, who represented the flawed but determined adult world, ultimately succumbed to a common, real-world illness. His passing is a poignant reminder of the mortality that haunts even our most enduring cinematic stories, closing the book on one of the franchise's most important figures, and adding a layer of real-world sadness to the film's legacy.
It's been you.
killed you once before, you son of a bitch.
Number 4. The violence in A Nightmare on Elm Street was meant to be the work of meticulous special effects. The blood, the wounds, the screams, all carefully orchestrated illusions. But too often the pain was real. The film's production was marked by a disturbing pattern of genuine injuries that left a literal mark on the final cut. The first casualty was Freddy himself. When actor Robert Englund first put on the iconic razor-sharp glove, he accidentally cut his own hand. The weapon was real enough to draw its creator's blood. Later, the film's hero would suffer a more serious injury. During the frantic sequence where Nancy runs home to set her booby traps, actress Heather Langenkamp badly cut her foot on a piece of set equipment. The injury was so severe it required stitches. When you see Nancy limping as she runs up the gooey stairs in the film, that's not acting. The bandage on her foot is real. The film wasn't just made with gallons of fake blood, it was made with the real pain and, in some cases, the real blood of its actors, permanently embedding their suffering into the celluloid. Number 3. It is one of the most shocking and audacious death scenes in horror history. Johnny Depp's character, Glenn, is violently sucked into his bed, only for a geyser of blood to erupt toward the ceiling. To achieve this unforgettable effect, the crew built a technological marvel, but that marvel quickly turned into a near-fatal death trap. The crew constructed an entire bedroom on a massive gyroscopic set that could rotate a full 360 degrees. For the shot, the room was flipped completely upside down, with director Wes Craven and the cinematographer strapped into salvaged Datsun car seats that were bolted to the wall. The plan was to pour 500 gallons of red-dyed water through the hole in the bed to simulate the blood geyser. But no one had properly accounted for the immense, shifting weight of the liquid. The moment the 500 gallons of blood were released, it cascaded onto the hot movie lights, sending powerful electrical shocks through the crew members who were pouring it. The sudden, violent shift in weight sent the entire room spinning out of control. Cables snapped. Ropes tore from their rigging. Crew members on the outside dove for their lives as the massive set bucked and rolled like an animal. Wes Craven, still strapped in his chair upside down, could only watch in horror and keep filming. The set, which Craven later dubbed the Ferris wheel from hell, nearly electrocuted and crushed the crew. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured. The chaotic, uncontrolled sloshing of the blood that you see in the final film, the way it streams at strange angles, is a direct result of that malfunction. They set out to film a nightmare and almost died inside one. Number 2. For actress Heather Langenkamp, playing Nancy Thompson meant becoming a hero to millions of horror fans. She was the final girl who fought back, who refused to be a victim. But for one fan, the line between admiration and obsession disappeared entirely. The horror of being hunted by an inescapable predator followed her home from the set. In the years following the film's explosive success, Heather Langenkamp was targeted by a real-life stalker. An obsessed fan sent her letters and made threatening phone calls, terrifyingly blurring the lines between her own identity and that of her on-screen character, Nancy. The ordeal became so frightening that Langenkamp eventually moved to London for several months, just to escape him. But the story takes an even more disturbing meta-textual turn. Years later, when Wes Craven was writing the sequel New Nightmare, a film about Freddy Krueger breaking out of the movies and into the real world, he approached Heather with a chilling request. He asked for her permission to write her real-life trauma into the script. The stalker plotline in that film, where Heather Langenkamp, playing herself, is tormented by a crazed fan who mimics Freddy, is based on truth. It created a horrifying feedback loop. The fictional film spawned a real-world monster, whose real-world terror was then reabsorbed back into the fiction. It is perhaps the most chilling example of how the nightmare refused to stay on the screen.
So I get in the bathtub, and they've rigged it so this It was so embarrassing, you know, you're just like, you're really exposed everywhere, underneath, on top.
Number 1. We have arrived at the number 1 horrifying truth behind A Nightmare on Elm Street. It is the film's very soul. The central, terrifying idea of a dream stalker who kills you in your sleep was not an invention of Hollywood. It was ripped directly from the headlines of a tragic and still largely unexplained real-life medical mystery. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, a terrifying phenomenon was documented among Hmong refugees who had fled the genocidal regime of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia and persecution in Laos. Dozens of otherwise young, healthy men were dying suddenly and violently in their sleep. Survivors reported that the men would cry out from horrific nightmares. Their breathing labored, and moments later, they would be dead. Autopsies revealed no clear cause of death. The Centers for Disease Control was baffled, eventually giving the phenomenon a name that reeked of defeat: Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome, or SUNDS. Wes Craven read a series of these articles and was captivated by one story in particular. A young man, the son of a physician, who was so terrified of what was chasing him in his dreams that he fought to stay awake for days on end. His family, deeply worried, finally saw him fall asleep while watching television. Relieved, they carried him to his bed. Hours later, they were awoken by his screams and thrashing. By the time they reached him, he was dead. In his closet, they found a hidden coffee maker he had been using to stay awake, and all the sleeping pills they thought he had taken, spit out and hidden away. He had been fighting for his life against an enemy no one else could see. What was killing these men? The Hmong people had their own ancient explanation: a malevolent spirit they called the Dab Tsoig, a nightmare demon believed to attack and suffocate victims while they slept. Modern medicine now points to a possible genetic cardiac condition called Brugada syndrome, which is particularly prevalent in Southeast Asian men and can cause fatal arrhythmias during sleep. But the most terrifying theory lies somewhere in between, in a phenomenon known as the nocebo effect, the dark opposite of the placebo. The idea that the profound, unimaginable trauma of surviving war and genocide, combined with a powerful, deep-seated cultural belief in a nightmare demon, could literally stress the heart to the point of stopping. That fear itself became the killer. A Nightmare on Elm Street is not just a horror film. It is a westernized ghost story built on the unimaginable and very real suffering of a people haunted by a nightmare they could not escape. Even in a new land, the monster was real before he ever had a name, a story born from a real-life plague of death, a production plagued by real-world danger and injury, a cinematic horror that bled into the lives of its creators, leaving a legacy of pain, fear, and tragedy that continues to this day. A Nightmare on Elm Street is more than a movie. It is a chilling testament to the idea that some nightmares don't end when you wake up. It proves that the most effective horrors are not those that are invented, but those that are discovered, lurking in the dark corners of our history, our minds, and our world. It forces us to ask a haunting question: